You remember that reel that went viral that Sahiba Bali did about the rupee touching 90? She asked a question that sounds completely reasonable. If the government claims that the economy is strong, why did it allow the rupee to touch the 90 rupee mark against the US dollar? The question went viral because it matched the perception. For most Indians, falling rupee feels like a loss of control, like someone took their eye off the wheel. But economics does not work on perception or instinct. So instead of defending the government or dismissing the criticism, let's take this question very seriously. Because the answer does not lie in one number, it lies in a chain of causes, and that is what I'm about to break down today. India's fear of a falling rupee is not irrational, it is historical. For decades, the rupee entered the public conversation only during national emergencies. Let me give you an example. In 1991, when India ran out of foreign exchange, in 2013, when the world labeled India as one of the fragile 5 economies, that 2013 episode, it matters because it trained us to see every depreciation as a warning siren. Back then, India was importing far more than it earned. The current account deficit had climbed to over 5% of the GDP, and that was a big concern. Foreign exchange reserves were thin, barely enough to cover a few months of imports. Inflation was running close to double digits. So when the global investors actually pulled their money out of India, India had no cushion. The rupee did not drift. It collapsed from the mid-50s to nearly 70 in a short span of time. That was a real crisis. This memory never left us. So when the rupee 90 flashed on screens, it felt like history is repeating, and obviously people are in a panic. There is something psychologically powerful about round numbers. 60 once felt very catastrophic, then 70, then 80, then 90, now the word is 100. Each time, panic followed. But something else happened very quietly. The economy kept functioning because currencies don't fail at round numbers. They fail when the fundamentals of the economy breaks down. So to understand whether rupees 90 is danger or just noise, we need to stop staring at that one particular number and ask what is happening around it. You see, currencies are not moral judgments. They are prices, and like all prices, they respond to supply and demand. Over the last few years, one force has dominated global finance. The US dollar became much more stronger than it was in the past. Interest rates in the United States rose sharply. Capital began flowing back into the dollar assets, and this was not unique to India. The euro weakened, the yen weakened, many emerging market currencies also weakened at the same time, along with the Indian rupee. This is what economists describe as a global dollar surge. When the world's reserve currency strengthens, others adjust, even if their domestic economies are completely stable. But global pressure alone does not cause crises. Crisis happens when domestic weakness amplifies global stocks. So let's examine that part very carefully, and then it'll make more sense. If the rupee touching 90 rupees were caused by Indian mismanagement, we would see the same warning signs like we saw in 2013. Very simply put, back then the current account deficit had blown out to nearly 5% of the GDP. India was spending far more foreign exchange than it had earned. Today, that number is close to just 1%. In 2013, the Forex reserves hovered around $200 odd billion and were falling fast. Today, our reserves are close to $700 billion. In 2013, short-term external debt made up roughly 1/3 of those reserves, a very dangerous imbalance for those times. Today, that ratio is far lower, closer to 1/5. In 2013, inflation was high and rising. If you remember, the onion and tomato prices were nearly 150 rupees. Today, inflation, retail inflation, is comparatively very stable. And most importantly, in 2013, markets behaved like there was something wrong. There was no confidence. Bond yields spiked. Confidence had actually evaporated completely. Today, if you look at it, markets are very calm, and that contrast actually matters because currencies don't collapse quietly, they collapse very noisily. What we are seeing now is not noise, it is just movement. There is a deeply held belief in India that a strong rupee equals a strong economy. But for a country that wants to export more, that belief can be very misleading. Why? For years, India's currency had become overvalued in real terms. This made Indian exports less competitive. An exporter, say in Tirupur or Morbi, does not compete with America. They compete with, say, your Vietnam, Bangladesh's of the world, and Indonesia. When the rupee is priced too high, Indian goods quietly lose orders. This is why economists track something called the real effective exchange rate. In late 2024, India's REER touched unusually high levels, signaling overvaluation. Since then, the correction has brought the rupee back into a more competitive zone. What looks like weakness in the headline numbers can actually improve export competitiveness underneath. A weaker rupee does have its own costs. Imports become more expensive. Foreign travel, of course, feels a little painful. Inflation risks must be watched very carefully. But this is precisely why economies actually build buffers, so shocks don't spiral into disasters. Today, those buffers actually exist in a very healthy way. The rupee has moved, but the system has absorbed it. That difference separates adjustment from a collapse. So, in simple terms, if we were to return to Sahiba Bali's question, did the government allow the rupee to touch 90 rupees, or did the rupee respond to a stronger dollar and global shifts while India's fundamentals prevented the panic? A failing currency is not automatically a failure. Failure is when a country has no room to respond to it. In 2013, the difference was that India had no such room, India had no such buffers. Today, it does. 90 rupees is not a verdict, it is just a moment, and moments only make sense in context.